think it's an important thing to look after them, for them to be here for when we're left. You want to leave something better than when you got to it, I suppose.
They've done an amazing job at actually locating the springs, bringing some of the springs back.
The future with the landholders together with the traditional owners, looking at the springs and getting ideas from what they would like to see.
And the grass is so beautiful. There's a hell of a lot of grass. Since last year,
Springs are emerging across the Great Artesian Basin area of Western Queensland. Their emergence demonstrates the success of the Queensland Government's artesian bore capping and pipeline reticulation program. Between government and landholder investment, more than $200 million have been spent on the program, with 727 bores rehabilitated, more than 14,000 kilometres of bore drains replaced by pipe. Aquifer levels are rising, causing the new springs to emerge in established spring regions. A multi-criteria analysis identified the main threats to the new springs were noxious weeds, feral animals and overuse. A cattle station in the Torrens Creek region was chosen as a focus site to develop management procedures that can be applied to emerging springs across northern Australia. The Queensland Government, through Desert Channels Queensland, has invested in stage 1 of the process to develop these procedures.
We've categorised the springs into 3 different categories depending on their general conditions.
Natalie Pearce is a DCQ Senior Project Officer.
The first category that we have is the arc springs, and these are the springs that have been established for a long time and which have very high floral biodiversity. They've got lots of different species and they're very mature and stable sites. We also have a host springs, and host springs are ones which have been persistent in the landscape for a prolonged period, but which don't have the same floral biodiversity as the bigger, more stable springs. And the final category that we have is emerging springs, and these are springs which have just recently emerged in the environment, are still very immature and very unstable. They fluctuate in terms of their water level and the species present.
2 years of investigation has found that species from the arc springs can repopulate host and emerging springs.
Our current understanding is that this likely happens during periods of inundation, and we believe this acts as a bit of a vector for species to transfer from one spring to another.
Aerial mapping and targeting of threats was carried out by DCQ's drone and species identification technology. Heavy infestations of rubber vine topped the list of threats. Through 2021-2022, control of rubber vine became the focus for Desert Channels.
We've had a 72% reduction in the extent of the rubber vine within the project area. And in addition to this, we've undertaken works to better understand the floral and fauna biodiversity.
Removal of this water-dependent weed has allowed even more new springs to emerge. Community involvement has been essential. Field days have brought interested people together to forge a road into the future. Workshops in 2021 and 2022 were facilitated by Bob Frazer, who brings decades of natural resource management experience.
The key thing is to actually make sure everyone's input is recognised and they get opportunities. Now, people are all different. Some might be a bit shy and others less inclined to put their ideas forward. But I think the overall aim of today's workshop was actually to collect those ideas. We've got a pretty diverse range of people, from landholders, traditional custodians, staff that have been working in the field. And I think that the workshop today, by going actually visiting sites around the place, the emerging springs, the arc springs and things like that, there's been shown a diversity in the actual of evolution of the springs.
Jason Hock runs cattle and goats over 110,000 acres, taking in a portion of the springs country.
They are good water supplies. I think it's an important thing to look after them, for them to be here for for when we're left, you want to leave something better than when you got to it, I suppose. We've also installed more waters away from the springs to take off cattle pressure, and fencing around our property has sort of taken the pig pressure away as well, with exclusion fence right around the outside of the property that contains the springs. What the DCQ's done here, along with the landowners, has been really good. They've got a lot of rubber vine under control, but definitely there's more ongoing work that needs to be done.
Input was received in open and respectful debate, and many ideas and approaches were identified.
I see a bit of a change since last year, especially with the springs, and the grass is so beautiful. There's a hell of a lot of grass. Since last year there was hardly much grass at all. The rubber vine where they poisoned it last year, it's all dying out. We've got to get together with the pastoralists and the Indigenous people just to try and sort ways out that we can overcome all these problems. And I think, if we all work together, I think, we can overcome the problems.
I'm really into people understanding, the landscape and looking after it for the future. So this is all part of, I think, a very big picture of people starting to understand Australia and to look after the land. I think they've done a fantastic job. That huge job of getting rid of the rubber vine, which is ongoing and will be a huge job in the future. They've done an amazing job at actually locating the springs, bringing some of the springs back because the rubber vine's not drinking all the water again, and hopefully sort of looking after the little springs in the future and working with the property owners.
And today has just been so excited, actually seeing new growth and improvement of the rubber vine getting killed off. The future with the landholders together with the traditional owners, looking at the springs and getting ideas for what they would like to see, and certainly Jeffrey has pointed out a lot of good concepts that would be viable and useful for the management of the springs, and so that's given me as a perspective on Indigenous person in the future that this is gonna work, but slowly, but eventually.
To further understand the developing ecosystems, flora and fauna surveys were carried out under supervision by Desert Channels Queensland.
In consultation with some ecologists from Boo Book, we've done fauna surveys over the springs in the area and identified that the number of macroinvertebrate species present at these sites is increasing, and also that there are 4 potentially new species that have been discovered here. In addition to this, the flora species have also shown promise in their increase over time.
Besides weed control, monitoring any change in the sites is essential.
The monitoring that I do involves taking photos at established photo monitoring sites to assess the visual changes in the springs over time, and this can include the wetted perimeter, so the water levels of the springs. I also take notes of all of the species that are present at each of the emerging springs that I visit, so that's the flora species. So that gives me an indication of the changes in floral biodiversity over time, because a greater floral biodiversity is an indication that the spring might be becoming more healthy and functional.
Trampling of the new springs by feral animals and livestock is another threat. Desert Channels developed a unique system of leaky fencing that allows access by native fauna while protecting the fragile environment from hard-hooved feral animals and livestock. A fence has been constructed around the springs complex by the landholder with DCQ support, and livestock will access water through spring-fed troughs.
Desert Channels they've actually developed a whole suite of approaches, from aerial spraying, misting, spot spraying to the small bits and pieces that are left over. they've got to be commended for the actual achievements that have happened over the last 18 months. I have never in my years working natural resource management see a government fund a project that was actually looking at doing something now and funding some innovative work to actually protect something that's going to emerge in the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Despite the short time frame, the project has delivered remarkable outcomes. New techniques in weed control, springs detection and springs management being applied throughout the region. The highlight has been this emergence of new springs across the region, and with strong support from landholders, these fragile new members of our region have a bright future. And this is only the start of the journey to manage these springs and their unique habitats into the future. Industry, government and Desert Channels Queensland support the grazing industry in managing for change and a sustainable future on the rangelands.